Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military. Now more than ever, you need reliable news you can count on. Since 1861, Stars and Stripes has been committed to bringing you the news without the spin. We believe in the First Amendment, and we're damn proud to have been there alongside you wherever you were deployed, keeping you connected. Today, we're only a click away. Go to stripes.com, use promo code podcast, and get 50% off your subscription. 50% off. There are some folks out there that think Stars and Stripes is a little old-fashioned. Well, folks, maybe right now, we need a little old-fashioned. Go to stripes.com and get reconnected with a legacy of news without the spin. Stripes.com. This is Military Matters. I'm Rod Rodriguez. 2 weeks ago, we started Season 2 with an in-depth look at the death of Specialist Vanessa Guillen. From her disappearance, the suicide of her suspected killer, and the discovery of her remains. Vanessa's story is a tragedy from beginning to end. But there is something positive that has come out of all this, and that's the spotlight the world has put not only on Vanessa's case, but on the case of other slain Fort Hood soldiers. That's a remarkable phrase, isn't it? Cases of slain Fort Hood soldiers. There are at least 7 this year, not including overseas deaths. At least 7 in garrison. I say at least because the numbers seem to change depending on where you're looking, but 7 is still kind of a crazy number. Now, one of the main discussion points I've heard come out since our last episode is that Fort Hood is huge. Of course, there will be deaths and crime. Nearly 37,000 service members call Fort Hood home, an installation that covers more than 218,000 acres. And like we said before, Killeen, the town just outside Fort Hood, isn't exactly a model town. Now, it's true that there's a huge population and crime does happen. Every military installation has crimes and deaths. That's why we have MPs, SPs, CID, NCIS. The whole gamut of law enforcement is present wherever service members are deployed. I get that. But something that bothered me about some of these deaths is that there are still lots of questions about them. And for the families of PFC Gregory Wedel and PFC Brandon Rosecrans, they think that had it not been for Vanessa Guillen's media attention, their cases would never have come to light the way they have. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the cases of PFC Wedel and PFC Rosecrans, both unsolved homicides. We understand that there are many other soldier deaths that are unsolved, and we hope that by putting a spotlight on these 2 service members, we can help shed some light on the cases we didn't mention. And remember, if you have any information on either of these 2 cases, or any cases in general, please call the Killeen Police Department at 254-501-8800, or contact your local law enforcement and they'll get you in touch with the right people.
I truly wish I understood the story that's unfolding.
That's Kim Wedel, PFC Gregory Wedel's mother. PFC Wedel was a motor transport operator, an 88 Mike, assigned to the 1st Sustainment Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood since November 2016. Last year, PFC Wedel disappeared.
He talked to me, he texted me, and that's pretty much the last I heard from him. He texted a few other friends overnight talking about how he had to get back to work. He couldn't be late. He can't get in trouble. He had to be back at work. And after that, his phone went dead. Never heard anything other than a voicemail when we tried to call. And that Monday, he didn't show up, of course, for formation. He was supposed to start processing out that day and being driven around to get all of his paperwork done and make sure everything was ready. And on Tuesday, his sergeant called me to ask if I had heard from him or if I knew where he was. And I said, no, I hadn't talked to him since, the 19th. And that's when they told me that he had been missing.
PFC Wedel goes missing the very day he's supposed to start his out processing out of the Army. He was ETSing, and by all accounts, he was happy to be moving on from the Army.
Like I said, he had made a lot of plans about going to school, and he wanted to live in Galveston or someplace. He loved the beach. So he was, as far as the getting out part, he was happy.
PFC Wedel has plans for his life after the Army, and on the very day he's supposed to start the process of getting those plans off the ground, he goes missing.
I tried to file a missing persons report, and they said that somebody in Texas had to actually do it. So Sergeant called them to report him as a missing person. I received notification that they were marking him AWOL. And at this point, I knew he wouldn't just disappear. So I immediately thought he's been in a car accident. Something happened and he's broke down on the side of the road and his phone's dead, so he can't get a hold of anybody. I hung on to that for a couple weeks. And, fighting with the Killeen police and fighting with CID about believing me that he hadn't gone AWOL, he didn't just disappear. That's over the last 10 months. That's been my day job. So basically we were told we were on our own. He was grown and they have no suspicion of foul play at that time. They assumed he just got in his car and took off.
This is the part that kind of threw me for a loop. A soldier goes missing on the day they're starting their out processing. The soldier's own mother doesn't know where he is, and instead of considering that something unfortunate might have happened to the soldier, the assumption is that he's gone AWOL. Then, after 30 days, the Army labels him a deserter. We'll talk more about that later. Months go by, and PFC Wedel's mother isn't getting any updates from Army or CID. In fact, it's not until 9 months later that the Army even offers a reward of $15,000 for information about Wedel's disappearance.
When Vanessa's case came up, Vanessa Guillen, and they put out a reward immediately, I had called and said, hey, what's the deal? Not that she didn't deserve everything that they were fighting for, and I was like, what happened? Why isn't my son getting anything? Because back in August, end of August, first part of September, they had told me they were working on a reward and they would send me info when it was approved, but I never got anything. So when I called, I didn't actually talk to anybody. I just left a voicemail because they don't call me back when I called ever. I suddenly got an email that had his $15,000 reward for information poster.
There's a really important detail to note here in the timeline. PFC Wedel was last seen on August 19th in his black Kia Rio outside of Fort Hood. Then his last known contact is the following day. August 21st, he's a no-show to formation. Shortly after, he's considered AWOL. And then on September 21st, about 30 days after his no-show, he's declared a deserter. Then in December, his family sees through a Carfax report that someone in the Dallas area is trying to have PFC Wedel's Kia Rio inspected. Nothing from CID. It's not until May that CID tells Wedel's mother that they took the car into possession back in January, 5 months after they tell CID about the car in the first place. And still, he's labeled a deserter.
And then when they raised Vanessa's to $25,000, they raised his also. And 4 days later, they got a tip. My understanding is whoever's called in gave them the exact location of where to find him. And that's when they went. That was Friday, June 19th. They went to that spot, and there he was. There hasn't been a lot of communication with the police or CID trying to help find him or keep me informed about what they do know. And I'm not asking details. I know that's not going to happen. But just to say, we have leads or we have nothing.
9 months after his disappearance, and only after specialist Vanessa Guillen's disappearance captures some media attention, does PFC Wedel's case get a reward. Then a tip comes in where his remains are 10 months after he's disappeared.
Well, they called me on that Friday the 19th to give me a heads up there was a possibility. And CID is the one who called and told me that possibility was there. They didn't want me to hear it from anybody else. The next morning I got up And as we were getting ready to leave to go to a family function, two military men were at my door, and I knew what that meant, that it was definitely Greg. It was just like losing him twice. You still, oh goodness. You spend 10 months looking for him and grieving. And then you find out all over again. The colonel at the base has called me twice to let me know that, send their condolences. My confusion, I guess, comes with them telling me that they consider him a deserter and no longer in the military. Why does the military keep contacting me, and why are they still part of the case? Because as of right now, they're not, no military funeral, and they're not going to help me get him home because he's considered a deserter.
So PFC Wedell's remains are retrieved, foul play is suspected, and a homicide detective is assigned to the case. But here's where the story takes another horrible turn. You see, the Army wouldn't remove PFC Wedell's deserter status. Therefore, they wouldn't grant him a military funeral or provide his family with any of his death benefits. The Army wasn't convinced that the soldier had died before he was labeled a deserter.
It's not like he went AWOL for a while and then decided to come back to Fort Hood. Somebody kills him and leaves him in a lot. He was there long enough that the wind and the weather and the wild animals did what they do. After 10 months, for him to already be mainly a skeleton tells me he was there the full 10 months. I mean, I would think the military would just do the right thing and revoke that status.
I wanted to understand the AWOL and deserter process better. Maybe there's a critical piece to the story that I was missing about how these labels work. So I reached out to attorney Stephen Karns, an expert on desertion and AWOL cases.
My name is Stephen Karns. I'm a former Army JAG, got out as a major, got off active duty in 1998, and have been in private practice since then.
What Stephen explained to me was that after you no-show to your place of duty, you're labeled AWOL, absent without leave. Your unit will reach out to your family and try to find you. After 30 days, you're dropped from the rolls, basically the unit's roster, and at that point, you're a deserter. Now, there's a really important distinction here. Labeled versus found guilty of being a deserter.
That's the way that they would basically say, we've made our initial determination, and then you haven't come back, so our paperwork or regulations state that we're allowed to file the paperwork to say that you're a deserter, to issue the warrant, which it just takes probable cause to issue a warrant. But it may be at the end you're not found guilty. You could have had an excuse for not reporting. You may not have known your appointed place of duty. So I've seen these. Frankly, I've seen a couple of these recently with COVID, where the member received orders. Then they were told to stay at home, and then 30 days have passed, and then the person said they didn't know their appointed place of duty.
Deserters are proven to have left without the intent of return. That's important to prove during a court-martial to be convicted of desertion. Until you're tried and convicted, the deserter status is more of a label.
The unit claimed that the person was a deserter, and then it may be that a court disagrees or they do agree.
What I didn't understand was, why is the assumption that the soldier is missing because they choose to be gone instead of the possibility that they are a missing person?
Well, when you say missing persons investigation, so that's a term of art that you see that's used out there, and each agency may have their own name for it, but the branches are different in how aggressive it is that they will go look for someone. So I would say the Army is easily the least aggressive in going to try and find someone. All I have seen in those cases typically is just a unit texting, calling the member and contacting their family and then sending a generic letter to their family saying, your son or daughter has not shown up for duty. This is what can happen if they don't show back up. They don't do any. This is assuming there's no other charges, like they're pending a murder charge or something like that. So this is just strictly if it's going to be AWOL or desertion. It's sort of like almost a fire and forget. They make the initial efforts, then that's the end of it if they don't hear from the person. The other branches, like Air Force and then NCIS, as far as the Navy and the Marine Corps, are much more aggressive in calling the family, showing up at the door, doing background checks to see if they can find out whether or not the person has shown up in different locations by using their data, their tax numbers, things like that. They're much more aggressive than the Army. The Army typically doesn't do anything, and then after 30 days, they issue a warrant, and then it's only up to local law enforcement at that point to go look for them. The Army typically doesn't do anything else. Again, this is just assuming that your typical AWOL and desertion case.
So the Army is the least aggressive to find their missing service members. Follow the necessary paperwork. I did my part. Someone else's problem now. That someone else being local law enforcement. It sounded to me like taking the easy way out of a situation that could reflect poorly on a chain of command.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, there are government agencies or people. I mean, they're run. Government employees will take the easier approach and just say, we're not going to do the investigation here. Let's just claim he's a deserter. And then if we get any new information, then we'll just always change our mind. Then you have a constituent or a parent who is not going to settle for that. And then the optics obviously do not look good. And one would think that the military has gone, just like any government agency, has gone, seen enough of these to know that, hey, this isn't going to look good. One would hope that it wouldn't just be the optics. It would be a moral obligation, if not a legal obligation, to take care of soldiers, right? I mean, that's what the recruiter tells the parents when they go into their home, that we're going to take care of your son or daughter and make sure that they're okay. It shouldn't take a parent, submitting a congressional inquiry or an IG complaint to get the military to do something.
The decision to label a soldier a deserter is entirely up to the command. If there's just the suspicion that there's more to this disappearance than the soldier simply deciding to leave and never return, they do not have to label them a deserter. When Vanessa Guillen went missing, she wasn't labeled a deserter. Her family moved quickly to put pressure on the unit and to raise questions about her disappearance. Unfortunately, PFC Wedel's family kept getting hit with roadblock after roadblock. No one would talk to them. But here's the thing. The question of why would a soldier desert on the day he's out processing is enough for the command to say, well, maybe there's more to this. Why would the soldier risk his education benefits when he has plans to go to school? Why throw all of that away to leave the Army a little bit earlier? They didn't have to label him a deserter. They could have lifted the deserter status anytime they wanted. When the family reported the Carfax inspections or when CID took the car into their possession in January, they could have lifted the deserter status.
Wow, that's shocking. I mean, that usually I think the soldier is going to get the benefit of the doubt, and it's really surprising that would be the decision that they made.
We've gone all the way to Fort Knox to find out, human resources to find out, is it just a signature? Senator Inhofe from here in Oklahoma is calling down, and the answer is always, it's an open investigation. We can't give you any details, and we're not going to do anything until the investigation. So basically, my son can't be buried until you find out who did it. I mean, he's just being held down there. He's either in Dallas or in Temple at the county morgue. They told me at some point he would be at Temple, but I don't know that he's there.
This is the standard line PFC Wedel's mother had gotten. Quote, "This is an open investigation. We can't give you any details." End quote. But then they go further to say they won't do anything until the investigation is complete. But the problem with that is that the investigation wasn't about finding a murderer. The Army was insisting on knowing whether the soldier had died before or after his status of deserter had been placed on him. Nothing about this case from the very beginning hinted or pointed at PFC Wedel leaving with the intent to never come back. The discovery of his car should have been enough to make the Army reconsider his status. Remember, he was never convicted of being a deserter, on top of the evidence pointing to the fact that it's very likely he wasn't.
I am surprised, although I've been doing it for a long time, and I get surprised a lot, even though maybe I shouldn't when these sorts of decisions are made. It's just, it seems repugnant to everything that the Army teaches, and more than just teaches, preaches about doing the hard right, taking care of families. I mean, to not give someone the benefits when it's not clear. There should be a standard of the benefit of the doubt should go to the service member, not to the federal government. I mean, it's the service member who's made the sacrifice, not the federal government.
The Wedel family's plight with trying to bury PFC Wedel began to make headlines. The Vanessa Guillen case put a spotlight on Fort Hood, and more people started to ask questions. Inevitably, PFC Wedel's case would be brought up. His family became increasingly active on social media, trying to get help from anyone to help clear their son's name so that he could be buried properly.
Just because the military is so big does not mean that they don't do things wrong. People need to step up. And just like in Vanessa's case, I don't know if her stepping forward sooner with the sexual harassment things might have helped. I have no way of knowing that. But I probably had 20 other soldiers from Fort Hood email me and text me their stories about what's happening to them there at Fort Hood. And all I can say is you guys need to go. If you don't feel safe telling somebody in the military, go to the lawyer, go to Vanessa's lawyer, go to the news, just call somebody, and don't let this happen to you.
Two weeks after our interview, the Army reinstated PFC Wedel, clearing the way for his military funeral. I emailed his mother, Kim, to find out what this meant to her and her family. She said, quote, "We are still fighting for answers, but hanging on. He came home last Thursday, and his funeral will be this Thursday, July 30th. End quote. She went on to say that Colonel Patrick Disney, commander of Fort Hood's 1st Cavalry Division Sustainment Brigade, told her that the reinstatement came after new evidence from the Killeen Police Department, allowing them to change the deserter status. She also went on to say that Killeen Police Department called her and told her that there was no new evidence. She said, quote, "Honestly, I don't care why they changed it. I'm just glad they did." End quote. I reached out to Fort Hood for some answers. I wanted to know if Specialist Guillen was ever classified as AWOL or a deserter. Why or why not? I wanted to know where PFC Wedel's Kia Rio was right now. What authorities had it in their possession? Was it examined? Who examined it? When exactly did CID become aware of the car? I received one answer to every one of those questions. Quote, "Due to the ongoing law enforcement investigation into the case, it would be inappropriate for us to comment at this time." End quote. I couldn't even get a straight answer on which law enforcement agency was holding his car, because it would be inappropriate to comment at this time. If you have any information on the death of PFC Gregory Wedel, please call the Killeen Police Department at 254-501-880 or contact your local law enforcement and they'll get you in touch with the right people. When we return, we turn the spotlight onto another Fort Hood soldier's death, that of PFC Brendan Rosecrans, when we return. Cheap Tickets wants to thank you for defending our country all over the world. Cheap Tickets wants to help you take a trip of your own. We believe the best trips in life are cheap. And as a proud supporter of the U.S. military, they want to offer you flights, hotels, car rentals, and even event tickets for less, because you deserve it. Visit cheaptickets.com/military and take 18% off hotels. Offer is valid for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Cheap Tickets thanks you for your service. cheaptickets.com/military.
The thing about it is, my friend, I have my rough minutes, but I know that before all that, I owe Brandon the right to know who killed him.
That's Thomas Berg.
Brandon has always referred to me as dad, father, and so on. Never, ever anything else. I've never called him a stepson, and he's not a stepson. Brandon and I was very close. He was close to his mother and his brothers, but he felt like he could tell me anything. And he could. He knew that my door in my ear was always open and that he wouldn't be judged by anything.
Like other young people his age, life after high school was a period of trying to find your place in all of this. Brandon tried college, but there was still something missing for him. After trying to find work with Amazon and coming up empty, Brandon began to seriously consider the Army. Then, May 11th, 2008, he graduated from basic training at Fort Jackson.
Well, Brandon was going through it, and you know, he got in the Army. Everything was fine. He got the 91 Juliet. He was taking care of tanks, and you know, he was proud to be in the Army, and he knew he made us proud.
I want to take a pause here. Now, Brandon's story is complex. Tom and I spoke over a Zoom call for a little over an hour, and I walked away feeling upset and sad. You see, Brandon's character struck me as a small-town kid with that small-town naivety. That unfortunately gets taken advantage of easily in a place like Killeen. He moved off post into an apartment on the bad side of town. That apartment got robbed 3 times, one of the times on the very day he was killed. He might have been hanging out with the wrong people, but I can't pass judgment on a young man's decisions. I was young too, and I didn't always make the best decisions for myself. In many ways, I'm very lucky that worse didn't happen to me, and I'm sure many of you could look back at 20-year-old you and say the same thing. As someone who's been an NCO and an officer, it's easy to look at our young soldier and see the missteps, but no matter how or what they do, what they screw up personally and professionally, they deserve the chance to learn from their mistakes, a chance to live long enough to mature and grow. Unfortunately for PFC Brandon Rosecrans, he never got that chance.
The morning of his death, there was a COVID check put out by his superior. My son answered, "I'm good." That was at about 7:30. Brandon was found, or the call came in at approximately 10:18, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then subsequently the call came in, or it may be vice versa. The call came in for the Jeep that was some several miles away burning. Now, we do not know the exact places where this happened. We know it was on Fuller Lane, and we know it was on Jubilation Drive. We don't know the exact spots, and that's, again, part of the detective process. We don't want it to, you know, they've walked all over Gillian's crime scene. They've walked all over Vanessa's crime scene. I don't want the same thing to happen to my sons. I want a memorial put up, but I don't. Putting it in a field in an area that there's no one is not going to make things better, and it may lose something. But the police tell me there are people of interest, and they are, you know, pursuing those people, and they will let us know as soon as there's a name to be given. But the case is moving along.
On May 18th, 2019, a vehicle fire was reported. That vehicle was PFC Rosecrans' 2016 Jeep Renegade. Investigators found the body of PFC Rosecrans in the burning vehicle and determined that he'd also been shot. Despite a lack of leads, Tom remains optimistic about finding his son's killer and has remained faithful that law enforcement and Fort Hood are doing all that they can.
That is one of the largest installations in the United States. And am I happy with some of the conduct that these bad seeds have put out from the Army? Absolutely not. Do I believe in the Army? Absolutely. Do I believe that everyone's going to get justice? Probably not. But it did open doors, and it opened eyes with all of these cases. Now, the reason that we haven't got in touch with the media and dealt with the media up to this point, number one reason is I do not want anything to hinder my son's case, number one. Number two, really, people don't understand that it was my son being found on the side of the road that actually got the Gillian and the Morales case back on the charts.
Tom is referring to Wedel when he says Morales. Many news outlets reported on PFC Wedel's name as Morales, Morales-Wedel, and Wedel.
Why I say that is because we had done a small deal here with CBS in our hometown, and it went viral on YouTube, and people started questioning. And then, of course, the Gillian family came forth, and then they went probably further than you should go, because at this point, there's no one in this earth that doesn't know about that. I mean, it's all over the world, and they will never get a fair trial because they'll never be able to find someone that's not impartial. And with my son's case, it has nothing to do with the Army. It has nothing to do with Vanessa. It has nothing to do with Morales. This case is a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. Am I frustrated with the police department? Absolutely not. Them people work diligently. I've gotten phone calls at 10 o'clock at night that they're working. I've been, the first week, of course, they're on it every minute, and they just exhaust themselves. And they did. And, we were talking 3 a.m. We were talking 2 p.m. They still talk to us. I just talked to Detective Jinks yesterday morning. We went over quite a few things. The fire department is investigating the Jeep. The police department are investigating the murder. The CID are investigating both. And then I'm told that the FBI is involved because ATF was involved.
A week prior to his death, Rosecrans had purchased several firearms. Now, he had been an avid firearms enthusiast and collector. Some of those guns had been stolen during the robberies we mentioned earlier. The circumstances around his death and the gun thefts caught the attention of the ATF and the FBI.
The Army, they like I say again, talk to us regularly. We don't have enough information for me to put out there to give someone, other than we just have people of interest that they would like to talk to. So that's more the reason that we've opened up and decided to do these interviews.
Guillen, Wedel, and Rosecrans were all very different people, and the circumstances of their deaths were also very different. But there are some common threads that run through each of these cases. One, of course, is Fort Hood. But it's also a huge post with lots of soldiers, so of course there will be some crimes and even homicides. But what stood out to me was media attention. The Guillen and Rosecrans deaths garnered lots of public attention. Rosecrans' case even gained federal attention because of the firearms that were involved. The Guillen family had LULAC, the League of Latin American Citizens, as well as attorney Natalie Quam in their corner. But a case like PFC Wedel's had little attention. We heard how little information was shared with the family and how the decision to overturn Wedel's deserter status may not have had anything to do with new information, but everything to do with the media attention and how Fort Hood was being portrayed. What we do know for certain is that justice should be served regardless of media attention or pressure. We know that families shouldn't be kept in the dark, and they should be allowed to bury their children with honor and dignity. We know that closure is a long way out for any family that is victimized by violent crime. There's also a lot we don't know. Guillen, Wedel, and Rosecrans are just a few of the soldiers that we know have been killed. How many others are missing, and the remains waiting to be found? Is there a greater problem at Fort Hood? Is this a command issue? Are there cover-ups happening? I wish I could answer these questions, but as they say in Fort Hood, it would be inappropriate for me to comment any further at this time. This episode of Military Matters was written and produced by Rod Rodriguez, executive produced by Benjamin Bateman. You can follow us on Twitter at StripesMMPod. Leave us a comment or a 5-star review if you think we earned it on Apple Podcasts. Those reviews really do help us reach more listeners. And as always, be sure to share this podcast with everyone on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and your Instagram. You can find our other episodes at stripes.com or under the podcast tab. Use promo code podcast and get 15% off your digital subscription to Stars and Stripes. And a huge thank you to our sponsor, Cheap Tickets, who are offering 18% off hotels for active duty service members, veterans, military reserves, and the National Guard. Visit cheaptickets.com/military. It's their way of saying thank you for your service. Go to cheaptickets.com/military today. I'm Rod Rodriguez, and I'll see you at the next episode. This was Military Matters.